Every month, money leaves your account before you've even thought about it. The phone bill, the internet, the insurance, the tank of gas on the way to work, the coffee on the way in, the streaming charge you forgot you were still paying. You didn't negotiate a single one of them. You looked at a number and you paid it, because that's just what it costs. That's the part that feels normal. Money goes out, and you barely watch it leave. Here's the thing you already half know. Some of those prices are high, some are low, and you assume it comes down to what the thing costs to make, or how good it is. Expensive coffee, better beans. Cheap flight, worse airline. That's obvious. What's less obvious, and what almost nobody stops to see, is that the price on most of what you buy has very little to do with what it costs to produce, and almost everything to do with a single hidden number. How many people are actually allowed to sell it to you? That number has a name. It's called market structure. Every market you touch sits somewhere on a spectrum, and its spot on that spectrum is set by two things: how many sellers there are and how hard it is to become one. Learn to see that spectrum, and something changes that you can't undo. By the end of this, a price tag stops being a number you either accept or refuse. It becomes a readout. It tells you how many hands were on the dial that set it, and whether yours was ever one of them. So let's build the lens first. The clean version, the way the textbook draws it. Picture a single dial with 4 settings. Turn it all the way to one end, and you get perfect competition. Here, there are many sellers, all offering essentially the same thing, and not one of them has any power over the price at all. Think of a farmer growing wheat. His wheat is identical to the next farm's wheat. If he tries to charge a penny more, every buyer simply walks to the seller beside him. He doesn't set his price. He accepts it. The market hands him a number, and his only choice is to take it or leave. Economists call him a price taker, and it is the single weakest position a seller can be in. The margins are razor thin because the moment anyone earns $1 above cost, someone undercuts them to steal the sale. Brutal for the seller. Wonderful, it turns out, for you, the buyer. Turn the dial one notch. Now you're in monopolistic competition, a clumsy name for a simple idea. Many sellers still, but each one makes their thing a little bit different. This is the coffee shop, the clothing label, the neighborhood restaurant. Most of the visible consumer economy lives right here. There's real competition, but because your favorite place isn't quite identical to the one down the block, it holds a sliver of power. It can charge a little more and not lose everyone. Differentiation buys a little control, but it's fragile control. Someone can always open up next door with a slightly better version. Turn it again. Oligopoly. Now the market is carved up between a handful of large players. Think of the companies that sell you air travel or wireless service, or the networks that run your credit cards behind the scenes. There aren't hundreds of them, there are a few, and they all watch each other constantly. Nobody has to sign a secret agreement for prices to drift upward together. They simply move in lockstep because each one knows the others are running the exact same math. And if some ambitious newcomer tries to enter and compete on price, the giants can crush them or just buy them. The few stay few. And turn the dial all the way to the far end. Monopoly. One seller, no alternative. The company that runs the only set of pipes into your house, or a firm that has swallowed its entire market whole, gets to set the price at whatever the buyer can bear. This is the strongest position a seller can hold. It is the exact mirror image of that wheat farmer who had nothing. 4 settings, 1 dial. That's the model. And once it clicks into place, you can't quite unsee it. You'll start locating things on it without meaning to. The pharmacy counter, the airport, the cable bill. Every one of them is sitting somewhere on that dial. But here's where the textbook quietly lies to you. It draws those 4 structures like species you'd find in the wild. as if markets sort themselves into tidy categories on their own and then just stay put. Take that clean diagram out into the actual economy, though, and it falls apart almost immediately. Real markets don't sit still. And far more importantly, the structure is almost never something that simply happened. It was built, on purpose, by someone who wanted it that way. Because think about it from the seller's side for a moment. Which of those 4 settings would you want to be in? Nobody wants to be the wheat farmer. The competitive end of that dial, many sellers, identical product, is the worst place on earth to run a business. You have no power over price, and your profit gets ground down to almost nothing. So the real game, the one every serious business is actually playing, isn't competing well. It's escaping competition entirely. Climbing that dial, away from the crowded end, toward the concentrated end where the power lives. The investor Peter Thiel put it about as bluntly as it can be put. Competition is for losers. Warren Buffett built one of the great fortunes in history on the same instinct and gave it a cleaner image. He hunts for companies with a moat. A moat is just a structure that keeps other sellers out. Something rivals can't cross. So when you hear the word moat, translate it in your head to one thing: a company trying to move up the dial toward the end where it and it alone holds the pen that writes the price. So how do you actually climb it? What builds a moat? This is the part almost nobody thinks about, and it's where the whole thing gets real. You climb by building barriers, walls that stop new sellers from entering and dragging you back down into competition. Some walls are ordinary. You need enormous capital to build the factory, a brand people already trust, a patent, a license the government hands out sparingly. And some walls you engineer by seizing control of something scarce that everyone else needs. In a game, you don't win the map by outfighting everyone in the same skirmishes. You win it by standing on the one choke point every resource has to flow through. Business runs on the identical logic. Control the choke point, and you no longer have to be better than your rivals. They simply can't reach the field. There's a subtler wall, too, and it's the most powerful of all. The kind that gets stronger the more people use it. Some products become more valuable to each user precisely because everyone else is already on them, and leaving means abandoning the whole crowd. Once a company has that, it barely has to fight anymore. The structure defends itself. Now, here's the masterclass, the most complete version of this ever built. Diamonds. For most of the 20th century, a single company, De Beers, controlled somewhere between 80 and 90% of the world's rough diamond supply. When too many stones came out of the ground and threatened to drag prices down, it simply bought them up and locked them in a vault, manufacturing scarcity on command. But that's only half the story, and the second half is the genius part. De Beers didn't just control the supply of diamonds, it manufactured the demand for them too. Before the late 1940s, a diamond engagement ring was not an ancient tradition. It was barely a thing at all. Then De Beers ran one of the most effective advertising campaigns in history, built around 4 words: a diamond is forever. It sold the entire world the idea that love itself required a diamond, and then made sure it was the only one selling diamonds. It held both ends of the dial at once, supply and demand, both under one roof. That kind of grip almost never lasts forever, and it doesn't take diamonds to make the point. A generation earlier, Standard Oil had controlled as much as 90% of all American oil refining until the government broke it apart in 1911 into more than 30 separate companies. And that's the tell, isn't it? Even the mightiest monopoly in the country turned out to be a structure that could be dismantled, not a force of nature, a thing that was built and could therefore be unbuilt. But here's the long horizon truth underneath both stories, the part most people miss entirely. Concentration isn't a phase a market passes through on its way to somewhere else. It's the destination every company is quietly steering toward all the time, because that's where profit actually compounds. In gaming terms, it's the meta. Once everyone figures out that the winning move is to escape competition and control a choke point, every serious player converges on that same strategy. The whole economy is running the identical play at once, and now you can watch them do it. And this is where all of it reaches into your own account. Look back at that list of charges that vanish every month without a fight. The internet, the mobile plan, the insurance, the flight on the one route only a single airline bothers to fly. Notice something. The markets where you feel like you have almost no real choice are exactly the markets sitting at the concentrated end of the dial. That is not a coincidence. That is the mechanism doing precisely what it was built to do. In a concentrated market, the price isn't set by what the thing costs plus a fair margin. It's set by what you, the buyer, will tolerate. The concentration you can't see is a surcharge you pay every single month quietly on autopilot. The reason some bills feel impossible to lower isn't that you're bad with money. It's that you're standing exactly where the wheat farmer stood, a price taker, while the seller is standing where De Beers stood. Which brings us to the part almost no one connects. That same dial runs on the other side of your life too, the side where you're not the buyer, but the seller. Because you sell something every single day, your work. Most people assume a wage comes from what a job is worth in some fixed and fair sense. But you now know it isn't automatic. It depends entirely on the structure. If you sell your labor into a market with many employers competing to hire your skills, you have leverage. You're standing closer to the seller who gets to name his price. But if you sell into a market with only one real employer that matters, a single dominant company that everyone in town works for, then you're the price taker again. You take the wage that's offered because there's genuinely nowhere else to go. Economists have a name for that mirror image, where there's one buyer instead of one seller, monopsony, and it sets your paycheck just as coldly as a monopoly sets your bill. The rarer and more wanted your particular skill, the more you tilt the dial back toward your own favor. So this is the real gap, the one between the person who can read the dial and the person who can't. It isn't that one of them is smarter. It's that one of them knows, walking into any transaction, whether they're holding power or handing it over. They know when they're the wheat farmer and should stop burning energy trying to haggle a price the market already fixed. And they know when there's real leverage on the table, and it's worth pushing hard. They steer their spending toward the competitive end, where prices are honest, and steer their career toward the markets where their labor is scarce and wanted. Same paycheck, aimed with a map instead of a hope. Think back to the very first idea in this series, price emerging at the point where supply meets demand. Market structure is the thing that decides whether that meeting is a fair fight or a fixed one. Whether the seller has to accept the number the market gives him or gets to write it himself. Supply and demand set the stage. Structure decides who's holding the pen. So step all the way back and look at the whole board. The economy stops being a flat wall of prices you either accept or refuse and becomes a landscape of dials. Some turned toward the crowded, honest end, some cranked all the way over to the concentrated one. You can look at nearly anything you buy and locate it. You can see that the most profitable companies on Earth are, almost without exception, the ones that found a way to escape competition. You can see that the cheapest things you own come from the markets closest to that wheat field. And you can look at your own paycheck and finally read it for what it actually is, a price set by the structure of the market you sell yourself into. If this is how you like your financial world explained, as architecture, as systems you can actually read instead of slogans and instead of fear, then this channel is built for you. This is episode 3 of a 5-part run through the machinery underneath your everyday money. On 8-bit economics, we strip complex financial systems down to their core mechanics. No hype, no predictions, just the underlying code. If this changed how you'll look at the next price tag, subscribe, hit like so the next person finds it, and drop a comment with the most concentrated market you're stuck buying from. Because by the time everyone sees it coming, the smart play is already over. So here's what to carry out of this. The next time a price slides past you without a second thought, ask the one question that actually decides who's winning and who's paying. How many people were ever allowed to sell you this, and what would it take for one of them to be you?